to Channel's Business Global with me, Juliana Olayinka, from our studios here in London. Coming up on today's show, Sir Keir Starmer has attended his first international engagement as the UK Prime Minister this week, as he joined other world leaders in Washington, D.C. for NATO's 75th anniversary. We'll be giving you a breakdown of the British leader's first 7 days in office. Then later, I'll be throwing back to a discussion I had with Professor Muyiwa Oyinlola for some insights into his inaugural lecture at De Montfort University, Leicester, titled Going Together to Go Far, My Pathway to Impacting Sustainable Development in Africa. But first, Prime Minister Sir Keir Starmer has attended the NATO Summit in Washington, D.C. this week, marking his first international outing since taking office 7 days ago. The summit, which celebrates NATO's 75th anniversary, addressed critical security issues and decisions for the alliance, including ongoing support for Ukraine and strengthening NATO's defence and unity.
This NATO summit is an opportunity for allies to stand together to strengthen their resolve, particularly in light of that appalling attack against Russian aggression. I'm pleased to have the early opportunity to affirm and reaffirm Labour's strong support, unshakable support for NATO. We're a founding member. It's now the 75th anniversary, but this is an opportunity to send that message in relation to Russian aggression wherever. But that attack last week was appalling, and so the message is even more important now than it was before. In relation to defence more generally, we will carry out our strategic review to look at the challenges, the capabilities, and on the back of that make further plans. I am committed to that 2.5% within our fiscal rules, but that strategic review needs to come first. But today, in tomorrow and the next day, is all about standing together with our allies, discussing practically how we provide further support for Ukraine and send a very, very clear message to Putin that we will stand against Russian aggression wherever it is in the world.
I kind of see you guys as the knot tying the transatlantic alliance together. The closer you are with Europe, the more you're engaged, the more, because we know where you are, we know where we are in both countries.
No, I think that's absolutely right. And now we go into a cup final on Sunday on top of all of that. So, very good. I actually I began to watch the game with the Netherlands Prime Minister, but we left at 1-1.
Well, you guys are still talking to one another?
We haven't seen each other since, so we'll have to see.
Well, we got a lot to talk about. So thank you all for coming in.
Prime Minister Starmer, dear Keir, welcome to NATO. It's great to see you again, but this time for the first time at the NATO Summit and the first time as Prime Minister of the United Kingdom. So congratulations on your election victory, and it's great to see you here at NATO in your new position so a few days after you took office. You are a staunch and important NATO ally. The United Kingdom spends more than 2% of GDP on defence, and I welcome your ambition to move to 2.5%. And I also, of course, recognise the great importance of the United Kingdom when it comes to strengthening NATO's deterrence and defence. Your jets patrols NATO skies, your ships patrols NATO seas, and you have British troops deployed on the eastern flank of our alliance. And you are also among those who are providing the most support to Ukraine. You started very early, back in 2014, and the support from the United Kingdom really makes a difference.
Thank you very much for those warm words, and thank you for your congratulations. We are very pleased to be here so early on in the administration of the Labour government of 2024, reaffirming our unshakable support for NATO. We are very proud of the fact that we were a founding member of NATO, and that if you go to Brussels to your headquarters and look at the original treaty, you see the signature of our Labour Secretary of State on that document. Can I also just say a huge thanks to you for your incredible service to NATO. It has been inspirational, and it will be very hard for others to follow in your footsteps, but we are all deeply grateful for what you have done on a personal level for so many years. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
I've just had a very good meeting with President Zelensky where I made it absolutely clear that as far as the UK is concerned, the change of government makes no difference to the support that we will provide. We've been united on this when we were in opposition, and it was really important to me to be able to affirm that face to face in the meeting. I did speak to him immediately after I was sworn in as Prime Minister last week. And so we build on that here at NATO at this important summit because it is an opportunity for our Labour government to reaffirm our commitment to NATO. We obviously signed the original treaty way back. We reaffirm today, but also to discuss with President Zelensky what further support that he needs, and to use our opportunity here with our allies to make sure that that support is agreed, and to reinforce, in a sense, as a message to Putin, the resolve of NATO, bigger now than it's ever been, more united than it's ever been, and absolutely clear-eyed about the threat of Russian aggression. Very good bilateral meetings that we've had an opportunity to make sure that those relationships are reset, for me to be able to say that our position on the world stage, leading on issues like defence and security, on climate change and on energy are so important. So a really good opportunity. But now we go on and do the work in Council.
Since being elected to Britain's highest office, Starmer has been actively engaging in his new role. The Labour government has made a swathe of announcements, including plans to liberalise planning laws, boost dentist appointments and recruit more teachers.
Yesterday, the work of change began. We're a Change Labour Party, and yesterday we started the work of changing the country. And as the dust settles on Thursday's result, what is becoming clear for, I think, all to see is the mood of the nation, of the country, what is expected of us, and the mandate that we have to deliver change. It's a mandate not just to govern, although it is certainly that, but it's a mandate that has put trust in us to change the country and to deliver. And it's a mandate to do politics differently, and that change started yesterday as well. I have, as you'll have seen, appointed a cabinet. That was done yesterday afternoon and completed. Some went to the Privy Council this morning to receive their seals, which was a moment in history. We followed that with the first cabinet meeting of the Labour government of 2024. At that cabinet meeting, I had the opportunity to set out to my cabinet precisely what I expect of them in terms of standards, delivery, and the trust that the country has put in them. Later on Tuesday, I shall set off to Washington for the NATO Summit. I've already had a number of international calls, as you will know, and as you would have expected, to establish the relations across with other countries, to have really important discussions about Ukraine and other pressing issues. And Washington will be an opportunity for me to have further discussions with some of the leaders I've already spoken to and some that I'm due to speak to. It is, of course, an important summit on NATO. It is for me to be absolutely clear that the first duty of my government is security and defence, to make clear our unshakable support of NATO, and, of course, to reiterate, as I did to President Zelensky yesterday, the support that we will have in this country and with our allies towards Ukraine. On the 2.5%, look, we are committed to it for all the reasons I said in the campaign. It will have to be done within our fiscal rules, and it will be done within our fiscal rules. But the strategic review will start shortly of our capabilities and an assessment of what is needed where. That we can do straight away. But the commitment to 2.5 is real, but it will be within our fiscal rules, and we will not be tempted, as the last government was, to pretend that money is there now, which isn't there. Look, in relation to the tough decisions, we're going to have to take the tough decisions and take them early, and we will. We will do that with a raw honesty. And that's really what sat behind Wes Streeting's description yesterday of the NHS as being broken. It is. Everybody who uses it and works in it knows that it is broken, and we're not going to operate under the pretence or language that doesn't express the problem as it is, because otherwise we won't be able to fix the problem as quickly as we need to. The work has started. And we will deliver change as quickly as we can, and that will include change, within the early months and years of the government. It won't be a question of simply saying nothing's going to change until towards the end of the first term, but different change will be delivered at different speeds, inevitably. What I can't pretend is that we can fix everything overnight. Look, the Rwanda scheme was dead and buried before it started. It's never been a deterrent. Look at the numbers that have come over in the first 6 and a bit months of this year. They're record numbers. That is the problem that we are inheriting. It has never acted as a deterrent. I'm really proud of the fact that my cabinet reflects the aspiration that I believe lies at the heart of our country, the aspiration that so many people have, wherever they started from, to make a journey in life for themselves, for their families, their communities, and ultimately for their country. And I said that at the cabinet meeting this morning, that I'm proud of the fact that we have people around that cabinet table who didn't have the easiest of starts in life, but to see them sitting in the cabinet this morning was a proud moment for me and for this changed Labour Party.
During a tour of the United Kingdom, the Labour leader met the First and Deputy First Ministers at Stormont Castle in Northern Ireland, where talks centred on public services, Brexit and the ongoing situation in Gaza.
You're right to say that we want to improve relations with the EU. We think we can get a better deal than the botched deal that Boris Johnson brought home, and we will work on that, understanding the work that needs to be done and the nature of the challenge. But yes, we do want to improve that relationship. In the meantime, we do have to get on with implementing the important changes that are necessary under the existing arrangements that we've got, because we're not going to be able to get a better relationship unless we demonstrate a commitment to the relationship and the agreements that have already been put in place. So we'll be doing both of those things, but we do that with a very strong mandate now, a very strong mandate for change, for a different relationship with the EU, a different way of doing politics, and we go forward in that spirit.
Elsewhere, the UK's first female Chancellor, Rachel Reeves, made her first speech in the Treasury as the new government outlines how it plans to boost growth.
Last week, the British people voted for change. And over the last 72 hours, I have begun the work necessary to deliver on that mandate. Our manifesto was clear. Sustained economic growth is the only route to the improved prosperity that our country needs and to improve the living standards of working people. Where previous governments have been unwilling to take the difficult decisions to deliver growth or have waited too long to act, I will not hesitate. Growth was the Labour Party's mission in opposition. It is now our national mission. There is no time to waste. I instructed Treasury officials to provide an assessment of the state of our spending inheritance so that I can understand the full scale of the challenge, and I will present this to Parliament before the summer recess. This will be separate from a budget that will be held later this year, and I will confirm the date of that budget alongside a forecast from the Office for Budget Responsibility in due course.
Coming up on Channel's Business Global, I'll be throwing back to a discussion I had with Professor Muyiwa Oyinlola for some insights into his inaugural lecture at De Montfort University, Leicester, titled Going Together to Go Far, My Pathway to Impact in Sustainable Development in Africa. And we caught up with Arnold Ekpe, the chairman of the Business Council of Africa, at the second edition of the Africa Business Book Awards. All of this after the break. Do stay with us. Welcome back to Channel's Business Globe with me, Juliana Olayinka, from our studios here in London. The Business Council for Africa recently announced the winners of its prestigious African Business Book of the Year Awards. The top prize went to Professor David Luke for his book, How Africa Trades, which explores the complexities of African commerce. The event, held at Dartmouth House in Mayfair, London, celebrated the contributions of African authors and publishers to business literature. The award aims to promote serious discussion of African businesses and encourage more writing on this topic.
Today we're having the second edition of the Africa Business Book Awards, which is sponsored by the Business Council for Africa. And the objective is for us to encourage the publishing and production of books on African businesses and businessmen. We've noticed as the Business Council for Africa, which is actually the oldest NGO that's been focused on promoting African businesses internationally, that there is a lack of books on businesses and businessmen in Africa. We think the reason is because no one is actually trying to develop that genre of books, and we've taken it as a role, as a challenge to get that process going. The first challenge is that there are not enough books being published. And the second one is I don't know how interested the publishers are in publishing these books. The most important thing for us is that there is need for books on businesses and businessmen because they provide context and color to investing in Africa, to the development of Africa, and to basically what the continent is in terms of its development. I think too often the stories about Africa don't focus on the business side. They focus on the culture, they focus on the negatives, but we forget that there are successful businesses such as the Dangote Group that are making dramatic changes on this economic scene in Africa. We think that those stories need to be told. But I think what we try to do, look for books that are interesting, that tell a story differently, that look at perspectives that have been missed, but much more importantly, say something or write something about what is going on in the African business scene. For us, the important thing is that African business has to move more to the center. Right now, it's not even anywhere. You should notice there are very good books and very good writers on fiction in Africa, okay? But on non-fiction, and especially on business, we need to do more work there, and that's what we're trying to do here.
Finally, sir, you said this is the second year you've been doing this. What has it been like? What's the reception been like? What are you hoping to achieve? What is the end goal?
The reception has been extremely positive. We've been surprised by the positive reaction we're getting from publishers, from writers, and from our members and other communities that are interested in Africa. The objective for us is to make this an annual event going forward, but much more importantly, we'll judge ourselves by how much we can increase and expand the envelope of business books in Africa.
Now to my final topic. My next guest, Professor Muyiwa Oyinlola, recently delivered his inaugural lecture titled Going Together to Go Far, My Pathway to Impacting Sustainable Development in Africa at De Montfort University in Leicester. The lecture highlighted Professor Oyinlola's extensive experience in leading multidisciplinary and multi-sectoral international projects aimed at addressing critical areas of sustainable development across Africa. I was going to go straight into the topic, which is to, of course, discuss sustainable development. But having read your profile, and you've just given me this, I've had a quick flick through. You're a very interesting character. So before we do dive in, talk to me about your background, who you are. I'm sure many of our viewers will be familiar with you, but for those who aren't so familiar with you, who is Professor Muyiwa Oyinlola?
Okay, good morning, Juliana. Thank you so much for having me here. My name is Muyiwa Oyinlola. Currently, I am a Professor of Innovation for Sustainable Development at De Montfort University in Leicester. And that just means working in the area of sustainable development, trying to bring about development across the African continent. I guess I have loads of previous lives, but again, my current life is in the area of research and development.
Where are we as a continent, and more specifically Nigeria, where are we with sustainable development and, commitments made in Paris, our pledges to the United Nations? Because on the one hand, we show up at all the COPs, we tick all the boxes, we've got all of our strategy in place. But when you're having behind the scenes conversations with these guys, especially those in oil and gas, they're just not ready yet. So where are we? Paint the picture for us.
That's a good question, an interesting question. I think on the positive side, so what you might be aware of is that we have there's a senior special assistant to the president on sustainable development goals. So we have an office of the SDGs, and so we interacted with them at COP 28. And interestingly, Nigeria is topping the chart in quite a lot of areas.
In pledges or implementation?
Implementation. So, but I think what you have to remember is that there's a continuum, right? And so where we're starting from is not where other people are starting from. Again, the SDGs, the 17 SDGs, they're quite a lot, but I think there's a lot of work to do. There's quite a lot of work to do, and it requires all players to be on board.
How do you think businesses in Nigeria can get over some of the hurdles, some of the headwinds that they may face? Because some people may see sustainable development as, quite frankly, unaffordable. It's like wanting to buy a Tesla, isn't it? Yep. Yes, we know that we should be driving electric cars. Some people can't afford it.
True. So I think this is where the role of government comes in. So there has to be policy incentives and interventions to be able to help businesses. And if you look at in the UK here, you've seen that the government has done a lot. So if you look a few years back, there were loads of incentives for solar panels, and then you have the critical mass adopting, and then you gradually roll back some of those things, and then it's now mainstream. Because what's happened also is that the economies of scale will push prices down. Okay, so I think it's one thing, the government has to be strategic in those sort of things to ensure that we have policies that are pushing people to do stuff in that area. I'll give you an example. So one of the projects I've done is on plastic, and you won't believe it, it is currently cheaper to have virgin plastic, to manufacture virgin plastic than
to recycle.
So there's no incentive for anybody to.
Wow.
The policy like saying every plastic has to have 10% of recycled content will just make that whole industry, will transform the whole industry. So I think that's one of the main things. It's always that government policy to drive the critical mass to uptake, and then it then becomes self-sustaining.
Absolutely. It's very fascinating. And you're right, once you kind of dig through the statistics, some of the most basic things are very, very alarming. We're running out of time. Professor, you've successfully delivered your first presentation. What next? Are you going to be doing another PhD? Or are you going to be taking lots of this expertise and knowledge back home?
So yes, I do quite a lot of, I've been doing quite a lot back home across the continent, and I just returned a few days back, looking at that, engaging with policymakers in the power sector and bringing collaborators from different sectors like Chatham House, Warwick. And so it's what I intend to do is that bringing those stakeholders, facilitating those stakeholders together, industry, government, academia, and not just that, not just from abroad, but also trying to see how we work together with local institutions to strengthen our local institutions. So how do we ensure that research and development is key in our universities in Nigeria and across Africa?
Well, I think it's wonderful. We definitely will be following your journey because, of course, it's so important. We need to have a seat at the table, right? It's not just Greta Thunberg. There are also, people of colour that are making noise about sustainable development. And, of course, those expertise are very, very, very much needed in Nigeria. Professor Muyiwa Oyinlola, thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you very much, Elaine.
Well, sadly, that's all we have time for today. But as always, do get in touch with your comments and suggestions. I'll see you at the same time next week for more in-depth business analysis on Channel's Business Global. Goodbye.